folks. Welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat, and it is Right Side Up in honor of Steve Staggs. We are back 30 minutes later than we normally are. It is 11:30 Central Texas time, and I want to welcome you back for another amazing time to reflect, to learn, to have your mind expanded. But it's one of those things that I want to share with you. We've forgotten who we are. That's the theme of today's topic. And, you know, think about this for a second. Have you ever like taken stock with either your spouse or with friends or anything and gotten feedback when somebody says to you, you know, have you ever asked someone, "Hey, what do you think of me? What's with the impression that I give?" Because a lot of people, they don't realize what they're projecting. And a lot of times people have been defined by their families, they've been defined by their friends, especially when you're a kid. You People tell you who you are, right? You can't be trusted, right? And if you've been in a tough situation, from a family perspective, a lot of people are critics and they want to tell you who they think you are. And they want to tell you, and really a lot of times they're speaking out of their own story. They're projecting themselves on you. And I think this is really important because who does God say you are? And I think that that's the thing that's really important. Like, who am I in you? Because the world is saying you're just the descendant of a monkey. You're just an accident. You're just the product of evolution and time. That's not certainly what the Bible says, certainly not what God says. But have you ever really like taken stock of that and said, well, who do you say I am? And you may find yourself like the writers of the Psalms, like my enemies are at every corner. They are literally devouring me. Like, who do you say I am? And I would say if you're listening to this, you're breathing, there's a purpose for your life. Like you were created since the beginning of time for a reason. And ultimately, God created this whole thing for a reason. We're going to be talking about that. Steve has some amazing commentary on this, and it's going to be challenging to you because when we first did this, it was very challenging. But this is really ultimately, we go back to the very, very beginning of creation into Genesis 1. And this is going to blow your mind, folks. So welcome back. A couple people here that I'm just so happy to see. Acting Emaciated, it's great to see you. And Susie Q, wow, welcome back. Folks, so many people are discouraged. I think this is going to be an encouragement to you. I really do, and I want it to be. I've been encouraged today. The reason I'm 30 minutes late for this stream is because I had amazing, amazing things happen, connections that are just so exciting, right? Everyone is losing faith in the crypto market. Do not lose faith. There are amazing things that are afoot, and just got to hang on. Got to hold on for dear life, as they say. My buddy Carter Hill is here. Good afternoon. I'm a son of the living God, and I'm part of the Elohim ruling class with Jesus. Amen. Boy, you just consolidated this whole thing down. So Carter, welcome. Glad that you're here. All right, let's jump into the content, and then we'll be back to kind of discuss it. But I got this on 1.25x, and if you have any issues, put it in the comments, and we'll talk about it after we get through this section. But prepare for your mind to be blown. Here we go.
That's very fair, and it's a very fair question. Virtually anybody who has spent any time trying to understand this will all come about very.
I just had to put that up for you, Steve.
Yeah.
I was like, Hornet UK is like reading our mail.
Yeah, 2 hours and 45 minutes the other day.
Yeah, we spent it all on that.
UK.
He was peeking into our conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to include him next time.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But what happens for all of us is I've been taught to draw certain prescribed conclusions when we hear certain things. You just described what happened with, people in your church when this guy came in and started using a different vocabulary and started connecting it to other parts of the creation. They ran him out. Why? because they were trained to think in a particular way, and that training created a line of defense that became impenetrable.
Yeah.
Because that line of defense not only wasn't just about defending how they thought about things, but how they thought about things was the very basis for their eternal security, their eternal safety, their ability to be acceptable to God. And so when I'm now going to go back to our several, the number of times we've talked strategically, well, who does that benefit? If we are told certain things that a particular conclusion is prescribed, then who then becomes the prescriber of the way we think? Well, the one who created that idea or that concept or that doctrine in theology or whatever it is. There's a belief system in place that predetermines what we are willing to hear and what we're not willing to hear. Well, the moment that realization came to me, I said, time out. God is the one who said, hey, you got a question, come to me, I'll answer you. And not only will I answer you, I am attentive to your very question. So what he said to Jeremiah, he said to Jerry, tell my boys, here's how it is. You got a question, ask me, I'm ready to answer. And I'm attentive. And when they ask, what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow the drawers off. Yep. I'm going to set something right in front of them. They're going to look at it, things that have been hidden from them that they did not know. But when they come to know them, boy, why? Because I want you to know why I created. I'm inviting you into this. You're players. Yep. Come on.
You have a role.
How to play. So, now so we're kind of getting where we're going here. So now let's go. So now what we've seen Elohim. We've kind of beat that horse. Now we've seen that they're one identified among the Elohim, whose name is Jehovah, that later on is described as the Lord Most High of the Elohim. Okay. And these Elohim were charged with both the authority and prerogative to actually manifest what the Father had in his heart and mind and desire to create. Okay? And Jehovah was the top dog. He was the guy who was in charge of building it all. We can then go into John 1:1 and take a peek of how he described it to John to describe to us, and it's quite profound. All right? So now we have the Elohim. They're creating. We now have the one who is Jehovah, who is top, who is the Most High of the Elohim, who's directed this whole event. Now let's look. So now we see what the Elohim look like. Now, for brevity's sake, the Elohim, there are certain things that characterize the Elohim. Chief among them is the prerogative to rule and to create in this dimension of forming, fashioning, and shaping with the Father, to bring about manifest his vision for why he's creating. Okay? That's the Elohim. The Elohim are a class of beings. Okay? They're not a singular being, like we're told, God. It's a class of beings. Now, how do we know that? Okay, now let's look at man. Okay, Genesis 1:26 and 27. If you can pick out one of your things so we can have folks look at what it's typically described, how it's typically described.
Genesis 1:26?
Yeah, 1:26 and 27. Yeah.
Okay. And do you want Hebrew?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, get whatever your favorite translation is so they can look at it generally so they have a point of reference.
Okay, well, let me go back then. Okay. All right, this is 1:26 and 27.
Now, once again, we have then God said. That word God, guess what that word God is?
Elohim?
Elohim, yes. Then the Elohim said. What is Elohim? It's a plural word. So these guys are conferring. They're all speaking together. So this group of Elohim are saying, let us make man in our image according to our likeness and let them rule over the fish, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here's this rulership dimension. Okay, now let us make man in our image and our likeness. This word image and likeness, these are both duplicate kinds of words. They speak of a duplicate being made from an original. In the context, without going into deep into this, image relates more to the outward expression of the duplicate. This is what we might call the capabilities. So the Elohim could talk. That's what they're saying. They said they could talk, they could walk, they could move, they could hear, they could create, they could rule. See, there are certain capabilities. So guess what? We can see that. See, man is built with these capabilities. See, we can see, we can think, we can reason, we can talk, we can do all of these things, these external kinds of capabilities. And then there is, and to our likeness. Once again, isn't it fascinating? We have this plural term. See, these are plurals to coincide with what? The plural Elohim. Now, the way the Christian doctrine deals with that is back to, UK's question. It's to say, well, this is speaking in the pre-New Testament era of the Trinity. Okay. I suppose that's one way you can look at it. Certainly the way I used to look at it. We can get into that at another time. But what we see the Elohim saying, now what's going to happen is we're going to create man in our image and in our likeness. And we're giving man all of these capabilities, both in terms of how they can function, as well as in terms of their assigned role, which is to rule the earth and everything that's on the earth. Okay? Now, then you go into, so now we see what that is. So now let's see how the Elohim actually did that. Okay? So now go to Genesis 1:28. This is the format I use most often because it gives me kind of a parallel, and you can see in each of these columns, you can see the Strongs that you can refer to go to the specific definition. Then you see the Hebrew word, you see the English, some of the English words that are used to translate that, and then you see the grammatical elements on the far right column. For the nerdies out there, this is kind of a fun thing to get into. But what you see here is you see how you really can't make a one-for-one, connection to these. But it says, and blessed them God. This is on the third column.
Yep.
God. Now, once again, and blessed them God. What is God?
Elohim.
And said to them, Elohim, be fruitful. So if you were to be, so there's what the normal translations say, and God blessed them, and God said to them.
Yep.
That's kind of weird. See, in English, what I would actually say, and if I were to use that, and God blessed them and said to them. Why would I repeat that? So if you actually go into this and look at it, and by the way, you can't escape this once you look at it.
Yeah.
When you go in and you actually look at these definitions on the left, on the very first column, these words, and you start doing like we did on the first ones, man, it's almost impossible to get away from. And the Elohim blessed them and said, Elohim, be fruitful and multiply. And some will say, well, yeah, you're kind of jockeying around that. Well, my question is the very question Jesus challenged me with. Well, what do you think it means to be in my image and likeness? If you're in my image and likeness, aren't you like me? See, if the Elohim created you, what are you? You're an Elohim.
Yep.
See? Now, why is it important that now we're going back to this wandering into error thing? Why is it important for us to be totally blinded to the simplicity that we are of the Elohim class? Why are there so many offenses created? Oh my goodness, now I'm starting to get it. The reason for assigning the English word God to Elohim is not just to distort us from the Elohim, but more importantly, to keep us from recognizing who we are in our place and order and rank within God's creation.
Yep.
We are among the Elohim. We are the ones whom God has created to rule with him, to create with him, to do all the things that he desires us to do with him. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Your vision. You are describing to us your vision, that we would rule your creation with you in the fullness of your nature and character. Wow. That is who we are.
Boom. Drop the mic. Drop the mic, Steve.
I never knew that.
Yeah. It is, and it's profound, folks. Like, when I came to understand this, like, this is like, it not only blows your mind, but you start to, everything kind of becomes simple in the sense that it becomes ordered. Because I feel like it was in disorder. And when I came to understand this through my own seeking of the Lord's confirmation, is things became ordered. And of course, what's the fruit of the Spirit in this, right? Well, yeah, it all lines up and is ordered. And then it illustrates in everything now how things are upside down. Because everything, it's almost like part and parcel of the distraction and of the distortion. And you see it like that. This is really what has opened my eyes to see the plans of those who are trying to lie. Well, we go back to the garden. It's like, it's the same thing over and over and over again. It's a lie and a distortion of the truth.
What's fascinating, Matt, when you go back to the garden, what the serpent was doing as the agent of Satan, that's the one that we would recognize there, is he promised her something that she already was.
Yeah.
You're not going to die. Instead, the Elohim knows that you're going to become like the Elohim. Well, of course he does. See? You're already an Elohim. See? You're missing. So right from the beginning, you see this distortion beginning to happen in the exchange between the serpent and Eve. That is then that same distortion, distraction, misdirection is happening in the scriptures that are telling the story.
In the translation.
In the translations. The scriptures themselves are plain.
Yeah.
It could not be simpler.
So the big story, I feel like I always have to make it, like, you kind of have to make it your own in the sense of, right, do I have this right? The implications of this, Steve, are so tremendous because now, like I said, everything gets ordered. And so let me just attempt this. I talk a lot about how the fact that, well, the world is saying that you're the descendant of a monkey, right? You're this billions and billions of years ago, you evolved out of this ooze and turned into Steve. And of course, I obviously push back at that. So if you start at that, well, the upside down world says you are, I think they're saying you're lower than the animals, but at minimum, you are an animal. Okay. Yeah. So let's think about this. That's the world's telling us right now is you're an animal. I listen to all kinds of things on physics. I love this stuff. I love to get into the quantum, but everybody's talking about evolution and everyone's talking about how you just bumped in, molecules bumped into each other and here you are. Well, no wonder if I can convince you that you don't have any value. So when I, swat the fly in the house, I might as well get swatted myself because I'm no different than the fly. Because that's what I've been told literally all my life. And here's a different story. And I feel like what this does for me is I always talk about it being like Technicolor. I think about the old school television when it was, black and white.
Yeah.
And, I think I saw in black and white, because there's a lot of things that, you miss the detail. It's certainly not 4K or 8K, television. It's really kind of grainy, not very high resolution, but I kind of get the gist of it in general. You start drilling into this stuff, folks, and it's infinite resolution is what it really is. And what we're seeing is this deeper resolution. You say, hold on a second. Well, if this lie is to essentially gain authority over you and to control you, well, what do we want to do? I want to make you ineffective. And so we started this whole thing with, hey, why are we here? What's the purpose of us being here? And I think that, a lot of new agey people, it's really interesting actually how all of these things kind of point to the same thing ultimately. The New Agey people get this whole idea of manifesting and that you've got power and that the divine is in you. And you see all these people that I think a lot of the church folk would say, okay, these are crazy people who live in Santa Fe. And these people smell like patchouli oil and don't bathe very often. And so they judge that. But when I see these pieces of what are they saying to each other? And it's interesting from a different perspective, or saying, hey, you're special, you're divine, you are these things, you manifest your future. And it's interesting that they've come to that from a very different angle than reading the Hebrew.
Yeah.
But when you see the picture of all of these things, right, the heavens declare, you look into creation, I mean, it's in everything, right? Almost screaming at us the order of creation. But then I brought up to you this whole idea of collapsing the waveform, right? The very nature of who we are in our observation. So if I turn my back to the double slit, I'm not observing it. But if I observe it, and I can do that observing from anywhere on planet Earth. Do you know that? I can focus my attention. Somebody could say to me, there is a double slit experiment happening in London, and this is what it is. I want you to focus on that, and you can collapse that waveform. You don't have to be looking at it physically.
Hmm.
And what's amazing about this, the detectors and all these things that are happening with creation, is there's an obvious, I think, inherent knowledge that we are different than the animals. And I like to keep it really simple. If I got to build a shed, I don't rely on my dog to do it. My dog just doesn't seem to be able to handle a hammer very well. And strangely enough, I tell my dog the plans and just wants to, chase a squirrel or bark. And I'm like, why isn't this dog getting this stuff? Right. And what's different about us? And then, of course, when you then dive into this story of creation, what is amazing to me is that if Yahweh of the Elohim came here, right, the design and the purpose of the entire creation, and the Yahweh of the Elohim, when he came, he called the singular God Father. There is this amazing, not hierarchy in sense of magistrates and judges, but one of family. And at the core of that family is love. And what is so amazing to me about this is you can take it from so many different angles. But what's so reassuring to me is the fact that the purpose of this creation has roles, and in those roles are purpose. And so if we are one of the Elohim class, of which Jesus is the authority, right? He is in the line of Melchizedek, right? He is the top dog. He's the boss, right? Listen to him. Hey, reminder, listen to him. That you can listen to him now. And so the question I would say to you, and what I'm asking myself daily is, should I go my own way or should I ask him? Well, every time I've asked him, many cases, it hasn't been for my own strength that things happen, because it's ordered in the strategic order in which he designed it to be. And so when I think about this, lean not on your own understandings, acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. Well, what's the straightest path? The straightest path is listening and doing what he says. And the greatest amount of life that comes is this fullness of being aligned properly with the order and rank of creation. And what's interesting about it is when we have this choice, we can't be like him. We can't be Elohim if we don't have the ability to make the choice. So there is this element, it seems like, of discipline. Because for me, it's like a constant reminder. Well, now I look at the Sabbath and I look at all these things. I'm like, oh my goodness, he's been telling this in so many different stories, even to the point where he tells an agricultural story and everybody goes home except a group of people who run after him. And they say, hey, what did you mean by that story? Because you have chased me down, I will tell you. This is, folks, if you knew that there was this thing called ChatGPT, right? And you had to produce something, you could do it the hard way, your own way, or you could go to ChatGPT and have some help. Now, there's a debate on the ethics of that. That's such a derivative of this idea of saying, what if I wanted to become aligned with the very purpose of why I was created? And what I've discovered is that when I align myself and I do and ask and do the things he tells me to do, meaning I walk through open doors, Steve. I don't kick doors down. I don't go my own way in that sense. I'm sure I do, but he redeems all those things too. But if I think about this order and this path, if the Supreme One who created this is outside of time, it's already done.
Yeah.
It's already complete. And I say, okay, well, why would he want us to experience this in the nature of time and in this process? Well, because he loves us. But it also makes me wonder, well, it's really short. I look at my dad in the casket and I'm like, man, This sucks. So what value is it? And so I'm going to ask you that question. What value is this portion of life? Right? So I look at my dad, right? All kinds of really interesting decisions my dad made. He was born into a certain culture, raised by Depression era parents, right? Where kids were to be seen and not heard. My dad got into the whole 60s white paper, man. Like he lived it out.
Mhm.
And that got passed on to me. And there's some good things and there's some bad things and some challenges. And he's 71 years old and he sits in the church and the pastor brings in a cinder block. And my dad has this, like the Lord speaks to him through a cinder block and it transforms him. But did he know, well, in the Hebrew, the Elohim is plural. My dad had no concept of the Elohim word being plural. Okay.
Well, we didn't care.
And I think that's important. It's important to recognize that too. And I think of aborted children and I think of, 3 months old babies who die of encephalitis or whatever, right? He's accounted for all of these things. The question is, if you're actually paying attention to this and you're actually watching this, and you're actually listening to these things and it's actually resonating with you, that's a part of the understanding to say, hold on, this is becoming a part of my own story of understanding that he's calling me to these things. And so I have been wired to chase after him. And what is strange about that is when you drill into the words, what is the ecclesia?
Yeah.
It's not the church, folks. It's those who are chasing after him. Well, in a way, I almost feel like he designed me to chase him.
Yes.
He designed me for that purpose. The 3-month-old baby who died was not even able to walk.
Yeah.
My dad, in this situation, almost prepared the way for me. Do we, and I think one of the things in going our own ways, we were like, Steve, I got to save everybody. And people get this idea that they do that work.
Yeah.
That they're the ones who do the saving. And we get this idea that, well, yeah, like this stuff is really profound stuff. But understanding the very nature of the word Elohim and it's plural and all this stuff, I don't know that it's meant for everyone. And I don't mean that in the wrong way. I mean it in this way. If it resonates, it was meant to resonate. Push back on that if that's wrong thinking.
Well, no, it's not. It's not at all. And this is going to be a little bit graphic, but I was playing baseball at a junior college, Cerritos Junior College, which was the premier junior college program in the country. And there was this tall, lanky left-hander who had a delivery very similar to a Frank Tanana kind of talent. And we were in the shower after a game one time. He pitched a great game, and I said, hey, if you keep this up and, you continue to really work on this, I have no doubt you could be a major league pitcher someday. And he looked at me just straight-eyed and says, what makes you think I have any interest in being a major league pitcher? Now, for me, that was, how can you even think that? How
Right.
can
That's
that
everything.
be an answer? Okay? And so the idea behind the whole thing is this is where the attribute of the Elohim that we see expressed all day long that we don't really recognize where it comes from is that element of choice. You cannot rule if you can't exercise choice. And so we have a very simplistic way of looking at choice, which is fine. What it is very simply is that why do we have the prerogative of choice? Why do we do this? By the way, that's where we started last week, the why. We're focused on the what and hows. Jesus is interested in us asking him why. Why? Because the whys give the meaning and purpose to the what and hows.
Yep.
And so just say plainly what you are getting at. Hornet, UK, you be the man. Okay? Here it is. You are an Elohim. You are not an animal. You have been designed to rule the entirety of God's creation with him. Not on your own, not on my own. With him. And there is one who's trying to use your authority to rule to serve its interests rather than God's interests. And so if you're interested in learning how to penetrate that, how to break that grip and move in the other direction, by the way, that's the whole upside down, right side up thing.
Yep.
Okay? So say it plainly, you're an Elohim. Go ask Jesus what that means and then enjoy the ride.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Like that encompasses everything. In Hornet UK, I really appreciate you asking that question.
Absolutely.
Because I've been asking that question for the last 6 months of Steve, is like, hold on a second. Because one of the wonderful things about you, Steve, is you're asking amazing questions and you're patient enough to let me get there. I'm like, well, why don't you just make it plain to me? Here's the thing I think is cool. One of the disciplines that Steve has that I've recognized that I really admire, he's not asking you to follow him.
No.
There's so many people out there that are trying to build some sort of audience and be your guru. Steve is not a guru. And it's been proven to me over the last, that's the reason I keep talking to him, honestly. If he was like, hey, you need to do what I tell you to do, and I figured it all out, and I'm the smartest guy, and I'm a prophet, that is the last thing that Steve would ever say. And what I really admire about this is, hey, I've just spent the last 40 years asking Jesus myself about these things, and he's been blowing my mind constantly. That's why I always come back to this fact. And it's, to me, the greatest thing I've ever learned from you, Steve. Jesus is alive and he speaks. That's it. That's it. That's absolutely it. And that's where it all begins, too, is this idea that, do you actually believe? And we've talked about this in many other episodes, is this idea that, well, Steve, yeah, I mean, I believe in God and, Jesus, yeah, I get that stuff. And yeah, I went to church and all this stuff. But are you saying that there's real power and that he would actually speak to me? Well, I feel like I've asked him, Steve, and he doesn't like come out and say, hey, Matt, let me tell you about this. And he doesn't speak the way like a person speaks. And so this term, even to speak, isn't a big enough word to define what it is. And so I experience things differently than you do, Steve. And so I actually here's a great example. We talked for 3 hours yesterday, Steve and I did. And we went to town. It was awesome. We talked about everything from baseball to the Anunnaki. It was awesome. It was crazy. But what was interesting is that Steve has cultivated in who God has made you to speak to you in a certain way. And you come to learn to identify that over time. And what's interesting is a lot of times where I have, this thinking for me, I think there's some commonalities between how we engage with Jesus, but I think that there's also some functional differences. For example, I do find that I tend to be alone without distraction. I find if there are commonalities, strangely, often in the shower is an amazing time for me. Like a really weird, like a lot of things come to me in the shower. Why? I'm not saying it's because of the shower or water. I'm just saying that for me is a time. The other is when I'm walking. It's interesting, like actually walking. And I'm early in the morning and nobody's around. There's stories and pictures and images and animals and all these things that speak. And it's not an audible voice. And I think that that's one of the challenges of all this stuff is when I say Jesus is alive and he speaks. Well, I'm expecting him to talk in English and, come out from a cloud and speak. And that's the confusing part of this, is that if he is a father and we're a son, he's going to accomplish what he intends to accomplish. The question is, are we consulting him at every possible turn? And that's where I feel like it has real value to me, is that I'm told by everybody, like, and of course I lead a lot of people right now in my work, and everybody's got an opinion. And I'm very comfortable listening to I love new ideas and all this kind of stuff. But I have to filter them through this, all right, Lord, and a lot of times for me, what it is I don't have peace about something. Somebody's like, hey, we need to do this and we need to do this and it needs to be like this. And I'm just like, it's not that I don't understand it. I understand what you're getting at. But I'm also going, why do I not feel like and have this sense of peace about this? Well, I go to him and I go, hey, help me understand that. And when generally it's so counterintuitive. He's like, oh yeah, you're unlocking something. Well, hold on. I mean, I've asked him about medical procedures. I've asked him about lists and what I've forgotten. And as you continue to cultivate that, it's a real value and it's a navigation. But I know I haven't been doing it for 40 years. But there's a possibility, Steve. Is it correct in me saying there's a possibility that he'll speak differently to me than he does to you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're Matt. He designed you to do certain things. He designed you to think. In order for you to do things in that certain way with him, you have to be wired to do that. So yes, the way he deals with you is going to be unique to me because we're two totally different people assigned to two totally different roles, all within the same vision of bringing about the Father's reason for creating, which is that we would rule with him in the fullness of his nature and character. With him. See, we can't rule apart from him. What did Jesus say? He said, listen, and I've had friends, me included, how long it took me to get this simple thing. You cannot do one thing apart from me. Now think about that. I didn't say that. Jesus said that. You can't do one thing. Well, does that mean I can't go out and do a bunch of activity? No, it just means. So in the context of eternity, it's not one thing. It's as if it never existed. It just disintegrates into nothingness. Why? Because that has no life in it. See? It has no life in it. And so, it's fascinating to me, Matt, that how we are trained to get on board with conforming to a certain standard of behavior when the Father says, I'm going to conform you to the very essence of my Son. Once I do that work in you, you will be indistinguishable from my Son because you will be my Son. See, we are doing this so that many sons can come into this. Many daughters can come into this. This is not for one person or one group of people. This is for anyone and everyone who is interested. Steve, are you interested? If you are, then come on, let's do this thing. I think you'll enjoy it once you get going. It's going to be a little rough in the beginning because, there's going to be some stuff that's going to have to be unwound. Don't worry about that. I got your back. This is all going to come together. Hey, yeah, you're going to be confused sometimes. You're not going to understand what the heck's going on. It's all part of the process. Don't worry about that. We're just untangling some knots from last week, right? We're just untangling some knots. But as each of these knots gets untangled, you are going to see things in the way that they are, not in the way you've been told they are.
Right.
And they are very different. Steve, you interested? That's all I'm asking of you. Are you interested?
Yep.
No more, no less.
Are you interested? I'm interested. That's the amazing thing about the supernatural. It's like, are you interested? That there's so much there. If you're interested in going even deeper on that, that's episode 10. I think it starts at around 1 hour. You can go dive into that. There's many other things there. The way I got to that content is, I've told you before, my buddy Ray is building a tool that will enable you to search any term from Steve's teaching, which I think is great. That's how I find this stuff, where to go in things. But this is called We've Forgotten Who We Are. And Steve speaks, so well. It's like, hey, why have we forgotten who we are? Well, that's because there is an adversary. There is one who is saying, you are something other than you are. And of course, we see this in our own lives in the tangible with family. People are often saying who you are. And, I think about the people that I admire the most in life. Those are the people that I feel like have a really good understanding of who they are. Well, what is this spiritual thing? We go back to Genesis 1 and we look at it and we say, wow, there is a reason that God created. And it is illustrated really well in the way they asked Jesus how to pray. And he said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Okay, you're the most holy, the most high. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Where? On earth as it is in heaven. Your kingdom come. There's so much wrapped up in that term kingdom, and Humberto Gonzalez has illustrated that in the chat. What is the kingdom? And it's really interesting to think about this, is that we talked about the prodigal son many times, this idea that the prodigal son wanted to get his inheritance now, right? That's us going our own way. It's so illustrated. I want my money and I want it now, and I'm going to go my own way. And what happens when you go your own way? You end up eating with the pigs. I mean, it's just a metaphor for everything we ever do on our own. But what did the prodigal son see? He saw that, hey, my father, he understood the nature and character of his father. And he said, hey, my father treats his slaves better than this. They eat way better than this. I wonder if I went home, would he let me be one of his slaves? As if the father would basically say, yeah, okay, yeah, you really screwed up. You're going to be a slave now. I'm going to change who you are. You were a son, but now you're a slave. Nope. What happens? When he sees his son far off, he runs out to greet him. He kisses his face. He puts a robe on him. and a ring on his finger. And what's really interesting is it's the same exact thing. It's our same story. It's my story. It's your story. I've gone my own way. And there are certain things that I feel like I can do. But Steve really illustrated this. Jesus said, without me, you can do nothing. Well, I don't want to do nothing. Well, in this context, what can you do? Well, if you want to draw a picture of an elephant, you can. You obviously have the ability to do certain things, but are they significant in quote unquote the kingdom? What is your role in the kingdom of God? It's said many, many times, many people said in the New Testament, the kingdom of heaven is near. What does that mean? And what is the kingdom? And why would you want it to be the same on earth as it is in heaven? Partly because it's different in heaven. So why did God create? Well, if you look at this, it's like, okay, God, Jehovah, creates this class of being, right? We're sons of God. What did they describe Jesus as? He is in the line of Melchizedek. He is the high priest. He is the son of the living God, right? The firstborn son. So what does that make him? All things were made for him and by him. So he is the boss of the Elohim. And what I think it's really hard for people, and I think it's actually becoming easier with this whole like alien stuff that people are talking about. And there's a lot of people, even in theological circles, who are looking at the old, mythological gods, lowercase g gods, right? Zeus and all these people, right? All of these things that we've heard about that we're like, well, those are just myth. Well, where do those come from? Because those kind of lowercase gods with attributes that are different than ours, or skills and abilities that are different than ours, are in the Sumerian text. They're all over the place. It talks about the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive and had offspring with them, and they were the giants, the men of renown, the Nephilim. There's a lot that's happened before this. And as we dive into this and we see this, we go, hold on a second. There is a class of being. The son, you don't cease to be a son. You just forget who you are. So you go your own way. You're like, I'm going to use this money for my own benefit. And what do you end up doing? You end up squandering it and you find yourself eating with the pigs. It doesn't change the fact that you are a son, but you recognize the father's nature and character and you come back. That's really what it is, right? We've forgotten. Everything is lying to us, saying, you're not that. You're just an animal. You're just the descendant of a monkey. You were just bumped in to another molecule and you crawled out of the ooze and here you are. And you're like, that just doesn't make any sense. Who does God say you are? You're a son of the Most High God. And what does it mean? I created this so that you would rule and reign with me in my nature and character. I gave you this. And there's a lot of evidence, I would say, that the angels were jealous. Why are you giving them this? Right? And I imagine in that kind of garden perspective of Elohim, if you actually consider it plural, that God created all of this. Jesus is the boss, man. And all these Elohim, we're going to create in our image. And what ends up happening is you have a seat at the table, but the serpent comes in and goes, no, he didn't say that. You can eat this. You won't surely die. They didn't know what death was. And what ends up happening is you get kind of kicked out. Well, you kicked out of this garden. And why does it have to be protected with flaming swords? Right? We act as if this was some surprise to God. No. In order to be this person that he has created you to be, you have to have choice. You have to have the knowledge of good and evil. You have to see both sides of the coin. But here's the thing. It all comes down to choice. This free will that exists, even in the context of God's strategy for the whole thing, starts in a garden, finishes in a city. Even in the context of that, you have to make choices because you can't be like him if you don't know the difference between good and evil. And so what is the battle? It says the battle's not between flesh and blood, right? It's not between you and me. The battle is the fact that there is this constant lie. And what does he say? Right? I will be with you until the end of the age. Actually, I'm going to send you a counselor who will remind you of everything I said. And without me, you can do nothing. So what do? We walk this thing out and hold each thought captive to him. Because another big part of the lie is we talk about Jesus as if he's dead. Oh, yeah. Well, on Easter Sunday, we say he's alive. But we act as if he's dead. We're like, oh, yeah, he was a good guy. Yeah, historical Jesus. And then what I hear all the time, even at my own church, is you need to come under the authority of the Bible. Steve said it many times. He's like, the Bible's great, right? The Bible is an account, it's a testament to what happened. But everything that has been written about in the scriptures happened, and it's an account of something that he said. And we take so much from it. It is so valuable. But it's like, if you want to get to know somebody, do you go like Steve said this? I love this story. He's like, all right, a new kid moves in down the block, and you're a kid, and you want to get to know that kid. Do you say, all right, I'm going to go see if there's a book written about him? No, you don't at all. The kid's down the street. You don't go, well, let me go find a book written about him and read that book. No, you go talk to him. Well, it's the same thing with, Moses goes up on the mountain and the 10 Commandments, right? This is the law being given, right? Written by the hand of God, right? Right. When those were broken, right? When those were broken because he was so frustrated, he sees Aaron and the golden calf and this written word of God, right? The first account, the first testament, the 10 Commandments breaks. Did he say, all right, forget that guy up there who gave it to me. Let me glue these back together because this is all we got. It's all about these things written in stone. And when you think about it that way, you're like, no, you go to the guy who authored it, and that's what he did. And he got a photocopy. Interesting. So the big lie in all this stuff is that God is dead. He doesn't speak, and you got to kind of figure it out on your own. And he's not really concerned with really the little stuff in your life. He's only concerned about the big stuff. Like he's only concerned with nations and kings. No, I'm a testament to you, and so is Steve, that no, he's concerned about every single thing that you're interested in asking about. And this whole idea you have not because you ask not is part of it, right? Are you interested in engaging with the creator of the universe who has authority over all things? And I will just tell you this. This is why I believe, because it's real. I see it like day to day. It is real stuff. Like I literally can ask him a question. I've told many, many stories about even what I would consider to be pretty stupid stuff I've asked him about. And it's like, oh yeah, you forgot this. I'm like, where does that come from? I mean, just an amazing story. So my daughter was really interested in photography. And so I had an extra camera. It was a DSLR camera. And it had an extra battery unit and everything. And I lent it to Ray. And Ray, it broke somehow. And Ray is really good at fixing stuff. And he spent weeks trying to fix this camera and literally could not get it to work. It just literally would not work. And he felt really bad. And he gave it back to me broken. And he's like, man, I'm really so sorry. I'm like, dude, it's okay. So my daughter had this broken camera in her room. And, I'm fiddling with it, trying to get it to work. And I can't get it to work. It's just broken. And my daughter says, hey, why don't we pray? I was like, what? Like, isn't that funny? Like, from the mouths of babes, why don't we pray about this? And I literally, I'm like, all right, hey, Jesus, help us understand what's going on with this camera. And it was literally within seconds. It was like, I just knew that this had to be really, really seated well or pressed down really hard. And literally it turned on. And you're like, well, okay. That's one of a million different things that have happened. And it's not because, God wants cameras to work but it's how this works. And, even if you talk to the people that are the scientific people, they're saying, hold on, they've done all these experiments where a group of people, not Christian people and not of a certain religious, literally just focus on this random generating of numbers computer and it changes. They do this double slit experiment and when we don't look at it, it's a wave. And when we look at it, it collapses and it's a particle. And that's the very basis of quantum computing, is that who we are in our observation changes physical systems. Well, if the scientific community understands this is what Jesus has been saying the whole time. This is what God's been saying the whole time. You have forgotten who you are. And I think actually, to the credit of the New Agey people, they know this stuff. The divine is in you. You participate in this divine. I would encourage you to look at, let me find this real quick. This is in, I believe, 2 Peter. And it literally was one of those things that just struck me It was amazing to me. Yeah, this is Second Peter 1 4. Yeah, Second Peter 1 4. Listen to this. Through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature. Through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, perseverance, all of that. But here's the interesting, for if you possess these qualities in increasing measure is reference to time. If you are constantly seeking and listening and asking, if you possess these qualities, this discipline of interest in increasing these qualities in increasing measure over time, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. Sounds like a straight path to me. And what's interesting is everybody wants a secret, right? I think about this. I watch in crypto, like, this guy does TA really well, right? Like, he's got an inside view. We build Chat GPT, like, well, we can access all of human knowledge. But look at what we're creating. We're creating these things that we would ask questions of. Did you know you can't benefit from AI unless you ask it a question? Do you think we create the way God created? Yep, we do. You know what's amazing about that is, if the double slit experiment is true, and that when we observe it, it collapses into the particle, like it becomes real, the state of it is known. Guess how we build games in gaming? We don't render stuff you're not looking at. It's amazing. Like, just to preserve like resources within a computer system. Like, let's say there's a tree way off in the distance. That tree just is the exterior shell. We just see like a kind of a blurred version of it. And then we walk over to it. We're this character, and we kind of move over, and we go all the way to the tree. And it gets more and more clear and more clear. And it renders and renders and renders. And we're there. And then we pull out our axe in the game, and we chop down the tree. Do you think the inside of the tree is rendered when you're way back 150 yards? No. It renders when you get there. Why? To preserve resources, because I don't know that you're going over to this tree. It's amazing when you think about it. And that's just an illustration of the fact that who you are matters in the context of creation. And that there are classes of people that God made us in his likeness and his image and his likeness. And we become like him when we understand his nature and character. But then we have choice to literally do things on a minute by minute basis in his very nature and character with him. Well, how do we do it in his nature and character? Well, one, there's some basic principles. But secondarily is, you ever been in a situation you thought you were going in for one reason and it was actually for another? Or where you literally were doing this thing that you thought was important, and then something else popped up, and you're like, oh, this is why I've come. And then what about ideas? What about inspiration? Where does that stuff come from? Like, I think about some of the people that have advanced things in this world, and everybody's like, well, that guy's a genius. Okay. Or maybe he was created to be this. But in my own hubris and in your own hubris, we think, oh, I got this all figured out. And I think time and time again, those who have gone their own way find themselves eating with the pigs. And you don't have to be too old. And I would say this, if you haven't eaten with the pigs yet, get ready. You're going to. You're going to. But what is that? Consider it pure joy when facing troubles of many kinds. You know what I'm so thankful for Steve? All my life, walking this path, at least since I was 28, of knowing this Jesus guy, I wanted someone to help me understand, how do I do this moment by moment? And, you think about the concept of discipleship. Steve was called to the men of the transfer, and he spent so much time with me. And I'm like, why did he do that? Did God really make him to do that? Yeah, he did. I'm so thankful that the God of all creation would choose a guy like Steve, who was a professional baseball player, who was so disciplined, would apply that same discipline to listening to him, and then he'd say, "Hey, I'll pass this along to you." And you know what the gift of this is? It's like, wow, now I understand how it works. And you know what's amazing? The result of it is rest, peace. You're not trying to choke things out. You're not trying to control things. You're not trying to manipulate things. And then when you start like understanding, well, then you read the Bible and you're like, hold on, all of this stuff is talking about the same thing. You're like, oh my goodness. So this is a lot simpler. Steve said it to me many, many times. He said, Matt, it gets to the point where it's just like breathing. It gets to the point where it's just like breathing. And you know what's also awesome is throughout of these 37 episodes that I had with Steve, live on camera, what was amazing about this interaction with him is you just constantly say, go ask him yourself. He'd share these things. He'd say, hey, I just was interested. And I'm like, is it really that simple? All you have to be is interested? Yeah. And you know what's funny is the Bible literally says, without faith, it's impossible to please God, because you first have to acknowledge that he exists, and then he rewards those who earnestly seek him. like all this stuff gets reinforced as true because the truth is probable. You can continue to ask and ask and ask and ask. Well, especially us in crypto, we're like, I want an edge. I want the secret. I want the advantage. Well, in this scenario, Jesus doesn't give you the edge so that you can extract from others, because what is he doing? He's building the kingdom. And that's what's so exciting about all of this. Why do I do this every Friday on a crypto channel? Just to and a lot of people come in and are like, oh, no, that Jesus stuff again. Because it's true. And if you want to understand how it's all constructed, the cool thing about this is, people have talked about the gospel as good news, right? And of course, whenever you talk about Jesus, it's almost super polarizing, right? You're like, oh, yeah, because everybody's got an assumption of who this guy is. The gospel is good news. Well, what does that mean? If it's not good news for everyone, it's not good news. This is what the gospel is. Are you interested in knowing the one who stands alone in the midst of the whirlwind? It's not about a book. It's not about religion. It's not about a book. It's reinforced by a book, but it is literally a living, speaking Jesus. And that's where it's at. And he's like, hey, you want to do this together? I often tell this story as an illustration. I was going to have a call with this really, really important person. He was a guy overseas. It was a big, big opportunity. And I'm like, okay, Jesus, let's do this. And so about an hour before the call, I sat down and I'm like, all right, Jesus, give me the goods. Tell me what's going on. And it was like crickets. Hour before, I'm like, hey, dude, tell me what's going on, right? Because I'm thinking, hey, I got Jesus on my side. He's going to give me he's going to throw me a bone. Nothing. I'm like, bro, what gives? What's going on here? He said, I thought we were doing this together. And I was like, oh. So you're not trying to give me advanced knowledge. That's not what this is about. It's not like, what are the lottery numbers or what's the stock pick? It's not how he operates. No. In real time, let's do this together. And I learned something really, really big that day. He's just not asking us to this isn't like, oh, I'm going to give you the lottery numbers. No, I want to do this with you. Let's walk this out together. Why do you think that they had to carry the ark? Because we do this together. And I think it's hard for a lot of people because they're like, hey, you talk about this Jesus like, oh, as if you hear him. Yeah, who are you? Without faith, it's impossible to please God. You have to basically acknowledge that he exists and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Well, what is that? Interest. Just interest. Are you interested? I'm interested. You interested? It's up to you. And you can choose not to be interested, and he will honor that choice. It's okay. But I think what's really cool is it has a supernatural quality that I can't put my finger on because I don't have I don't have the language to describe the gravity of it. And I think that that's the coolest thing because it's custom designed and custom tailored for you. It's not, it's different for me. It's different for Steve. It's different for you. And I really struggled with this deal. Like, I am asking him, I'm not hearing jack squat. And he's like, Matt, why don't you be Matt and I'll be Steve? And you know what the result of this was? A man that I admire so much, Steve, was so patient. And you know what's so funny is I think a lot of people want to correct everyone. They're like, oh, that's faulty theology. Or, hey, no, he didn't do that. You know what he said most of the time? He said, hey, are you open to a different perspective? Yeah, I am. I'm open to a different perspective. Well, what was the result of that? And it's funny when you look at the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. Wow, that's kind of who Steve was. Those sound like some pretty good attributes to have. So I'm going to trust you. I'm not going to kick at the goads, or I'm going to try to avoid it. And I'm going to do this with you and walk this out with you and hold every thought captive. And you're going to make my path straight. And all right, like that's where life is, fullness. And what is the kingdom? I was always confused by the term, the transfer. What is the transfer? And I realized what it is. It's the transfer of the man. It's you. It's me, the woman, whoever. It's you. It's me. What is this transfer? Are we going alone? Because if you really boil it down, everybody wants to like categorize sin. They're like, oh, that's really bad. I wouldn't do that. No. And when you kind of back up from it, it's like, what is sin? It's going your own way. We're all doing it. We've all fallen short. Well, what does it look like to do it with him? It's like breathing. It can be like breathing. If you don't know, ask him. Hey, teach me how to hear from you. But Steve is right, because I experienced the same thing. It's a journey that you will just be like, why am I at peace in the midst of this storm? And so many people are looking for that peace and purpose, right? That's the real commodity of all this stuff. I think about that like, well, there's going to be a day where I have a Lambo, and that Lambo can do 185 miles an hour, can go to 0 to 60 in 1.8 seconds. Okay. And I think about this whole crypto thing, and I'll wrap it up with this. We all want, financial security, right? That's the name of the game, right? Everybody's like, oh, get rich. It says you can't serve God and money. What is money but a tool? So having its proper perspective of what it is, what do you really want? If you really examine your obsession with money, you recognize that you think the money will bring you peace. You think that the money will bring you security. You think that the money is going to give you rest. Buy my time back. I think what you'll be surprised. It's not the money. Now, imagine this. Imagine you have that peace. In any and every circumstance, you have this calmness. You have this ability to handle any situation, any circumstance. And then you have the money. Well, that would say to me that there's purpose for you having this. And it's not just for you. So, all right, if I'm holding every thought captive, what do you want me to do with this money? Well, that's what I think unlocks the generosity. And I think that's a part of the kingdom. That God is utilizing the resourcing for those who are seeking him to go, hey, there's a plan we have. And what is this kingdom? It's a group of people who are considerate of others, right? Living and walking this out with Jesus and with each other. And what ends up happening is there's thoughtful consideration of others. What's the whole Richard Hart thing? Like, what is this? What is this advocacy of a guy named Richard Hart who is super smart? And I don't even know if he understands how God is using him. But when we look at this situation, I go, wow, almost a Nebuchadnezzar type of character doing amazing things. Why? Because there's provision in this. But it's like, is it for the purpose that a certain group of people get rich and have Lambo? No, he's doing something strategically that he planned since the very beginning of time. It starts in a garden and it ends in a city. It has growth to it, a trajectory. And that growth is the growth of you understanding this, and it's beneficial to you. Are you interested or not? Steve was a professional baseball player, and he said when he walked across that chalk and he was in the game, like everything quieted for him. And you think about that, like that's the metaphor, right? Are you in the game? And one of the evidences that you're in the game is all the attacks that are trying to get you off sides. But he said to me, when I said, Jesus, only you have the authority to speak to me, he said, all heaven rejoices. Wow. So all I'm saying is go to the source. Jesus is alive and he speaks. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, God, for sending Steve. You are a son of the Most High God. You are the Elohim. You have certain attributes that are his. You are a representative. You are the impression, the icon of Christ. You are, you're valuable. You're very valuable. You have no idea how valuable you are. So don't listen to the lie that says you're an accident, you can't be trusted, you're nobody, you're worthless. No. Ask him, hey, what do you want me to do? What's the plan? He told me he wanted me to unlock global generosity by giving. All right. How would we do that? I don't know how to do that. Okay, I'll show you. Trust me, and I will show you. Okay. All right. This sounds like a partnership to me. Folks, thanks for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt. Thank you, Steve Staggs. And thank you, Carter Hill, for bringing Steve to that Texan meetup. Because if it wasn't for you and that whole conversation, I wouldn't be so blessed today. Have a great weekend. And on a personal note, my daughter broke the school record in high jump yesterday. She finished 5th in the state, and it was such an amazing thing to see her accomplish something that she was setting out to accomplish. And so she's the new record holder for the school, and I'm very, very proud of her. Folks, take care of yourself and others, and do not mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.